A god who made himself must somehow exist before he existed, and the Egyptians never flinched from that puzzle. They told of Atum, the one who fashioned his own being, yet they placed him within none, the dark and boundless water that stretched in every direction without shore or surface. How could anything stand apart from a flood that held all things and yet was nothing? No light touched those depths, no wind disturbed that face, and time had not yet been born. For ages beyond counting, the waters simply were, formless and patient, holding every possibility that had not yet chosen to exist. And then from within that endless dark, a single thought began to gather. It was the will to be, the longing of existence to know itself, and it took shape as a god who had no mother and no father, who created himself from the substance of his own desire. The Egyptians of the ancient Nile would whisper his many names across the centuries, but in the oldest tellings he was Atum, the All, the one who came into being alone. He rose from the waters upon a single mound of earth, the first dry land to ever break the surface, a small hill of silt and stone that would echo in every temple built along the river for thousands of years to come. Atum stood upon that primeval mound, blinking into a darkness that had never been broken, and he understood that he was utterly alone. There was no other voice to answer him, no other face to meet his gaze. So the first god did what creators do. He reached into himself and drew out the beginnings of a family, breathing life into the void with nothing but his own essence. From his breath came Shu, the god of air and the dry winds that would one day fill the world with space and light. And from the moisture of his body came Tefnut, goddess of rain and the wet mist that gives the air its weight. These were the first children, born not of union but of will, the twin pillars upon which all of creation would soon rest. Shu and Tefnut wandered out across the dark expanse of Nun, exploring the limits of a world that barely existed, and for a time they were lost in that endless water. Atum, grieving, sent out his own eye to search for them, a living light that traveled across the deep until it found his children and led them home. When they returned, the joy and the tears of Atum fell upon the primeval mound, and where each tear struck the earth, the first human beings sprang into being. So the people of Egypt believed they were born from the weeping of God, brought into the world by the love a creator felt for the children he had nearly lost. In time, Shu and Tefnut came together, air embracing moisture, and from their union were born two more powerful beings who would shape the very stage on which all stories would unfold. The first was Geb, the god of the earth, broad and green and laughing, the soil and the stone and the hills that rise from the riverbanks. The second was Nut, the goddess of the sky, her body arching vast and star-flecked above the world, swallowing the sun each evening and giving birth to it again each dawn. Geb and Nut loved each other fiercely, and they clung together so tightly that there was no room between them, no space for anything to grow or breathe or live. This was a problem that troubled the order of things, for the world could not flourish while earth and sky lay pressed together in an endless embrace. And so Shu, their father, the god of air, stepped between his children. He set his feet upon the body of Geb and lifted Nut high above his head, raising the sky away from the earth, holding them apart with the eternal strength of the wind. The Egyptians imagined him there still, the great figure of air forever straining upward, keeping the heavens aloft so that everything beneath could draw breath. In that moment of separation, the world as mortals would know it finally opened, with the green earth below, the starry sky above, and the living space of air between them where all of history would come to pass. But before Shu had pried them apart, Nut had grown heavy with children, and she carried within her the next generation of gods, the great deities whose names would ring through every age of Egypt. There was a difficulty, though, for the sun god had decreed that Nut could not give birth on any day of the year. The calendar held only 360 days, and each one had been forbidden to her, so that her children seemed destined never to be born at all. It was a curse meant to keep new powers from rising, a jealous attempt to freeze the order of the cosmos exactly as it stood. Yet the gods are clever, and the god of wisdom most of all. Thoth, the ibis-headed keeper of knowledge and the master of words and reckoning, took pity on the sky goddess. He went to the moon, who in those days shone nearly as bright as the sun, and he challenged the moon to a game of Senet, the board game beloved of pharaohs and peasants alike. Moved by careful move, Thoth won small slivers of the moon's light, and from those winnings he fashioned 5 new days, days that belonged to no ordinary year, days that fell outside the forbidden calendar. Upon each of these stolen days, one of Nut's children was at last allowed to enter the world. On the first of those days was born Osiris, eldest and most radiant, a god of such grace and goodness that the very earth seemed to lean toward him. On the second came Horus the Elder, a falcon-bright warrior of the far horizon. On the third was born Set, restless and red as the desert sands, his strength as wild and untamable as the storms that scour the dunes. On the fourth came Isis, wisest and most loving of all the goddesses, a mistress of magic whose devotion would one day reshape the fate of the divine. And on the fifth and final day was born Nephthys, gentle and quiet, the keeper of thresholds and the friend of the grieving. 5 children, born of stolen light, who would become the heart of every Egyptian story ever told. When these children had grown, Osiris took the throne of the earth, and he ruled as the first great king of Egypt. In those golden years, he taught humankind the secrets of civilization. He showed them how to plant grain in the black soil left by the flooding Nile, how to tend the vine and press the grape, how to bake bread and brew beer, how to honor the gods with songs and offerings. His sister Isis ruled beside him as queen, and together they lifted the people out of savagery into a world of law, abundance, and peace. The land flourished as never before, and the name of Osiris was blessed in every village from the great delta to the distant cataracts of the south. But where there is light, a shadow gathers, and the shadow had a name. Set, the brother of Osiris, watched the love and the glory heaped upon the king, and his heart curdled with envy. He could not bear that his brother should be adored while he ruled only the barren desert. So Set devised a cunning and terrible plot. He held a great feast and brought forth a beautiful chest, crafted of cedar and gold, and measured in secret to fit the body of Osiris exactly. He announced that whoever could lie down within it perfectly would receive it as a gift. One by one the guests tried and failed, and then Osiris, smiling and unsuspecting, laid himself down inside. In an instant Set and his conspirators slammed the lid shut, sealed it with molten lead, and cast the chest into the cold currents of the Nile. So the first king died, betrayed by his own blood, and the chest carrying his body drifted down the river and out to sea, where the waves bore it at last to a distant foreign shore. There it lodged against a young tamarisk tree, and the tree, sensing the divine presence within, grew swiftly around the chest, enclosing it inside a great and fragrant trunk. And in the palaces of Egypt, the news of the king's disappearance spread like the chill of winter, and the people wept, for the light of the world had gone out. But Isis would not surrender her beloved to death. Cloaked in mourning, the great goddess set out across the world to find him, wandering through strange lands, asking after the chest, following every whisper and rumor until at last she came to the place where the tamarisk had grown. With patience and magic, she recovered the body of her husband and bore it home in secret, hiding it in the marshes of the delta, while she gathered her strength to work the greatest of her spells. Yet Set, hunting in the night, discovered the hidden body, and in his rage he tore it into many pieces and scattered them the length and breadth of Egypt, so that his brother could never be made whole again. Still Isis did not despair. Together with her gentle sister Nephthys, she searched the whole of the land, walking every riverbank and wading through every reed bed, gathering the scattered pieces of Osiris one by one. Where each piece had fallen, the people would one day raise a shrine, so that the broken body of the god became woven into the very soil of the nation. And when at last the goddess had gathered nearly all that remained, she bound the pieces together with linen and with spells, and so the Egyptians remembered Osiris as the first of all who were wrapped for burial, the first to be made whole again beyond the reach of death. Then Isis worked the deepest magic of all. Taking the form of a great bird, she beat her wings above the still body of her husband, breathing into him a single, fragile spark of life. It was not enough to restore him to the throne of the living, but it was enough for one final act of love, and from that union Isis conceived a child. Osiris, his work upon the earth now ended, descended into the world below, where he became the lord of the dead, the green-skinned king who would weigh the hearts of all who passed and welcome the worthy into eternity. No longer a god of the living harvest, he became the promise of life beyond the grave, the hope that death was not an ending but a doorway. And the child that Isis carried was Horus, the falcon-headed avenger, whom she raised in secret among the whispering reeds of the delta, hiding him from the wrath of his uncle Set. There in the marshes the young god grew strong, nursed on his mother's magic and his father's memory, until the day came when he was ready to claim the throne that was his birthright. The contest between Horus and Set would rage across the heavens and the earth for 80 years, a struggle between order and chaos, between the rightful heir and the usurper, watched over by all the gods of the great company. In the end, before the assembled council of the divine, Horus was judged the true and lawful king, and the throne of Egypt passed to him, while Set was bound to the deserts and the storms where his wild strength belonged. So order triumphed over chaos, and from that day every pharaoh who sat upon the throne of the two lands was called the living Horus, the earthly embodiment of the falcon god, while in death each king became one with Osiris, lord of the eternal fields. And so the great cycle was complete, turning forever like the river and the seasons it commands. From the silent waters of none rose Atum the creator, and from him came the air and the moisture, the earth and the sky, and from these came the gods who lived and loved and died and rose again. The Egyptians looked upon the rising sun each morning and saw in it the eternal renewal of that first creation, the triumph of light over darkness, of life over death, repeated without end. They built their temples upon the memory of the primeval mound, and they carried these stories in their hearts through 5,000 years, certain that the gods who had made the world still watched over the black soil and the shining river, keeping the great cycle turning, now and for all the ages yet to come.